Ozymandias poem by Percy Shelley. Ozymandias shows us a theme of permanence. This story was told to the speaker, and his enthusiasm to tell the story will continue forever. The speaker met a traveler from an antique land, which started the entire discussion of the ruined statue. The protagonist did not personally experience this spectacle, yet he could recall the entire story, word by word, detail as well as the status of the ruins. This not only shows us how deep was the description to the speaker, also shows us how impatient he was of telling others about the statue's presence. The theme of the permanence in the poem is really well developed because the reader can think that the story will continue being told, and this will be a kind of legend all eternity. The statue is an alive example of permanence. This monument was originally constructed by a tyrant king to glorify himself. In my personal opinion, when the poem says, "The frowning wrinkled lip and sneer of cool command" are perfect examples of negative emotion. However, the sculptor who made this statue was inspired by Ozymandias in life, and the result was a proper image of his personality even in death. Before the monument was destroyed, it was a representation of the king's abused permanence, and the details of his behavior were deeply expressed. We can note when the statue was abandoned or just left without attention or destroyed. However, the feelings embodied in the statue will be eternal, without options of being destroyed. The status of the sculpture is described in the poem so deeply, and phrases like drunken legs, shattered visage, and colossal wreck gets to the reader's mind very intense. Some other verses like the hand that mocked and the heart that fed cannot actually be seen on an invariable statue, yet they are still mentioned. The legend of the tyrannous ruler overshadows the visual representation of Ozymandias, and the traveler cannot distinguish the knowledge he had from the actual. This shows us that the effects of arrogance and cruelty are also everlasting, even though the state of the statue was not. On the other hand, in the pedestal, where it says, "My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings, look on my words, ye might, and despair." This little humility attitude was taken from the mouth of the king himself, which shows a completely different kind of permanence, his legacy. We know these words are not positive, but they will be indestructible, contrary to what happened with the rest of the statue. Thousands of years have passed since the statue was built. At the time it was told to the speaker of the poem, but he still remained, and people will be telling this story for thousands of years more, which was the poet want. Ozymandias continues to be a source of information for travelers and historians. The legacy of the king is bigger than his life or his monument, and it will survive to be told by people centuries after his reign. Finally, I have to mention that Percy Shelley, the author of this poem, lived during the late 1700s and early 1800s, yet his poetry is analyzed 200 years later. Thank you so much.